The three girls she left at a clinic 27 years ago walked in, grown, beautiful, and looking for answers. Tell me, where are you listening from? Take a breath and listen closely. How could anyone abandon children like that? The whisper rippled through the small town of Mapleton as news spread about what Carolyn Wilson had done. On a cold October morning, security cameras captured her pulling up to the Mapleton Medical Clinic. Three identical 5-year-old girls in matching pink coats, stumbling sleepily behind her. She knelt down, whispered something in their ears, handed them a small backpack, and then drove away, tires screeching on the wet pavement. Were it not for the early arrival of Nurse Jenny Thompson, the three little girls might have remained in the biting cold for hours. Instead, Jenny found them huddled together on the doorstep, their small hands intertwined, their dark eyes wide with confusion and fear. "My name is Amara," the middle girl said, her voice surprisingly steady for a child in such circumstances. "These are my sisters, Nancy and Nina. Our mommy said you would take care of us now." Inside the backpack was a sealed envelope containing birth certificates, a brief medical history, and a handwritten note. "I can't do this anymore. Their father is dead. I never wanted to be a mother to someone else's children. Find them a real home." The note was signed simply Carolyn Wilson with no forwarding address, no phone number, nothing that would help authorities locate her. The only other item in the backpack was a faded photograph of a handsome black man in military uniform smiling broadly at the camera. Scrolled on the back were the words, "Dennis Brown, their real parent." That was 27 years ago. Karen Hewley adjusted the delicate diamond pendant in the display case, her arthritis making her movement slow but precise. At 73, she was considering retirement from the jewelry business she'd built from nothing. But something kept her holding on. Perhaps it was the memories the store held, the dreams she'd poured into it when she had nothing else to live for. The bell above the door chimed and she looked up to see three striking young women enter her shop. For a moment, Karen thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. They were identical, tall and elegant with flawless dark skin, high cheekbones, and the same arresting almond-shaped eyes. They moved with confidence, looking around the small exclusive boutique with interest. "Welcome to Hewley Jewelers," Karen said, straightening her posture. "How may I help you today?" The woman in the center stepped forward, her smile warm but professional. "Miss Hewley, my name is Amara Brown. These are my sisters, Nancy and Nina. We're the designers of the Triplets collection, and we were hoping to speak with you about potentially carrying our pieces in your store." Karen felt her breath catch. The Triplets collection had been making waves in the jewelry world for the past 2 years. Innovative designs that blended traditional African influences with contemporary elegance. She'd been trying to secure their line for months, but had been told the designers were extremely selective about their retailers. "Of course," Karen said, gesturing toward the private consultation area at the back of the store. "I'm honored. I've admired your work since your first showing in Paris." As the women settled into the plush chairs, Karen noticed the oldest looking of the three, though they were clearly the same age, studying her with unusual intensity. There was something in her gaze that made Karen uncomfortable, as though the young woman could see right through her carefully constructed facade. "Before we discuss business," the sister Nancy, Karen believed, said quietly, "we'd like to ask you about someone you might have known many years ago. A woman named Carolyn Wilson." Karen's hand, reaching for the tea service she kept for important clients, froze in midair. The name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in decades crashed over her like an icy wave. How could these women possibly know that name? And why would they be asking her about it? I don't believe I recognize that name," Karen said, her voice betraying her despite her best efforts. "Is she relevant to your collection?" No, the sister who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. In her hand was a yellowed creased photograph. "She was our stepmother," she said, placing the photo on the table between them. "And we have reason to believe you might be our grandmother." Karen looked down at the photograph she had given to her son Dennis over 30 years ago before he deployed for the last time and felt the carefully constructed world she had built begin to crumble around her. Hook, could a grandmother's secret change their lives forever? What these three remarkable women didn't know was that Karen had spent the last 27 years searching for them, hiring private investigators, following false leads, praying every night that the granddaughters she had never met were safe, loved, and together. What they couldn't possibly understand was why Carolyn had truly left them behind, or the devastating secret Karen had kept all these years about what really happened to their father. And as Karen looked into the faces that so mirrored her beloved sons, she realized that the moment she had both longed for and dreaded had finally arrived. Karen's hands trembled as she sat down her teacup. The porcelain clinked against the saucer, the sound unnaturally loud in the suddenly tense atmosphere of the consultation room. "How did you find me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of years of shared hardships and triumphs. "It wasn't easy," Amara said, taking the lead, as she often did. "We've been searching for answers about our family for almost 10 years now." Nancy, the most analytical of the three, pulled out a small leather portfolio. "After we graduated from college, we hired a private investigator. All we had was our father's name, Dennis Brown, and this photograph." Na, whose gentle nature had always made her the emotional anchor for her sisters, reached across the table and tentatively touched Karen's hand. "We knew nothing about our father's family. Carolyn never spoke of you, and after she left us, there was no one to ask." Karen closed her eyes briefly, the pain washing over her anew. "I never knew you existed until after," she paused, composing herself, "until after I lost Dennis. By then, Carolyn had already disappeared with you girls. I've been looking for you ever since." The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. "What happened to our father?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible in her eyes. "We were told he died in combat." Karen shook her head slowly. "That's what Carolyn told everyone, but it wasn't the whole truth." She stood up and walked to a painting on the wall, carefully removing it to reveal a small safe. With practiced motions, she dialed the combination and retrieved a worn manila envelope. "Your father was in the military. That much is true. He met Carolyn when he was stationed at Fort Benning. They had a whirlwind romance and she became pregnant with you three. They married quickly, but it was trouble from the start." Karen's voice grew distant as she recalled the past. "Carolyn wasn't prepared for instant motherhood, especially with triplets. Dennis was deployed shortly after you were born, and she struggled." Karen returned to her seat, placing the envelope on the table. "Dennis didn't die in combat. He completed his tour and came home, but things with Carolyn had deteriorated. They were discussing divorce when she swallowed hard. There was a car accident. Dennis was driving home late one night when his car went off the road. The investigation suggested he had fallen asleep at the wheel, but I never believed that. Dennis was always so careful." "You think something else happened?" Nancy asked, her investigative instincts kicking in. "I don't know," Karen admitted. "But what I do know is that after the funeral, Carolyn changed. She became distant, started drinking. She would leave you girls with neighbors for days at a time. I tried to help, offered to take you in, but she refused. She resented me, blamed Dennis and his military career for ruining her life. And then one day, you were just gone. Carolyn told everyone she was moving to be closer to her family in Minnesota. I had no legal rights to you, no way to fight for custody. By the time I hired someone to find you, the trail had gone cold." Amara's expression hardened. "So, she just left us at a clinic and disappeared. Did she ever try to find out what happened to us?" Karen shook her head. "Not to my knowledge. I spent years and most of my savings trying to find you. I kept hitting dead ends because you had been placed in the foster system under protected status since your abandonment was technically a criminal act." Now wiped away a tear. "We were lucky. We stayed together, which doesn't happen often with siblings in foster care, let alone triplets. Our first placement was temporary," Nancy continued. "But then we were adopted by the Johnsons when we were 7. They were good people. Henry was an art teacher and Maria worked in finance. They gave us a stable home, encouraged our education. Amara added with a small smile. Maria taught us about business, and Henry introduced us to jewelry making as a way to channel our creativity. Karen nodded, drinking in every detail about the lives of the granddaughters she had missed watching grow up. And now you're world-renowned designers. Dennis would have been so proud. She opened the envelope and carefully extracted several items, legal documents, letters, and another photograph. This one of Dennis holding 3 tiny bundles in his arms, his face alight with joy. This was taken the day you were born, Karen said softly. He sent it to me from the hospital. He wrote on the back, Mom, meet your granddaughters, Amara, Nancy, and Nina Brown. They're going to change the world someday. Na took the photo, her hands shaking. We have so few pictures of him. I have more, Karen assured her. Albums full and letters he wrote while deployed. They're yours now. Amara, always the most focused on practical matters, turned the conversation back to their immediate concerns. When we discovered you might be our grandmother, we also learned about your jewelry business. The coincidence seemed too perfect to ignore. It's not just coincidence, Karen said. Jewelry has been in the Brown family for generations. Your great-grandfather was a jeweler in Harlem during the Renaissance. Your father helped me open this store before his final deployment. He said it would be my legacy. She paused, a shadow crossing her face. What I don't understand is why Carolyn would have left you at that particular clinic. It seems so random. The sisters exchanged another meaningful glance. That's part of why we're here, Nancy said carefully. In our research, we found something odd. That clinic had a connection to Carolyn's family. Her mother was one of the founding nurses there in the 1960s. Karen's brow furrowed. But why would she lead you somewhere connected to her? Wouldn't that make it easier to trace her? We think, Amara said slowly, that she wanted us to be found, just not by you. The implication hung heavy in the air. Karen felt a chill run down her spine. What are you saying? Na pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 27 years ago. The headline read, Local jeweler's son dies in tragic accident. Investigation ongoing. The accident investigation wasn't as conclusive as you were led to believe, Nancy explained gently. There were inconsistencies in the police report, witness statements that didn't add up, and Carolyn's statement changed several times during the investigation. Karen felt the blood drain from her face. Are you suggesting that Carolyn had something to do with Dennis's death? We don't know, Amara said honestly. But we think she might have feared that eventually the truth would come out. That might explain why she abandoned us somewhere connected to her family. She knew we'd be safe, but also that we'd be placed in the system under protected status, making it nearly impossible for you to find us. Karen's mind raced, pieces falling into place. Carolyn's erratic behavior after the funeral, her refusal to let Karen spend time with the girls, her sudden disappearance. There's more, Na said, hesitation evident in her voice. We found Carolyn. What? Karen gasped. Where is she? She's here in Mapleton, Nancy answered. She came back about 5 years ago after her second husband died. She lives in a small apartment on Elm Street and works as a cashier at Donovan's supermarket. Karen felt as though the room was spinning. After all these years, Carolyn had returned to the very town where everything had happened, where Karen had built her life and business. Does she know you found me? Karen asked, her voice strained. No, Amara replied. We haven't approached her yet. We wanted to meet you first, to hear your side of the story. Na leaned forward, her eyes earnest. We've spent our lives wondering about our past, about the truth of who we are and where we came from. Now that we've found you, we need to know everything, even the painful parts. Karen looked into the faces of the 3 young women before her, her son's daughters, her flesh and blood, and knew she had to tell them the truth, no matter how difficult. But as she opened her mouth to speak, the shop bell rang, signaling that someone had entered the front room. Through the partially open door of the consultation room, Karen caught a glimpse of a woman with graying blonde hair, her once pretty face now lined and tired. For the first time in 27 years, Karen was looking at Carolyn Wilson, the woman who had married her son, given birth to her granddaughters, and potentially harbored a deadly secret all these years. And from the shocked expression on Carolyn's face as she spotted the triplets through the doorway, it was clear that this unexpected reunion was about to become even more complicated than any of them could have imagined. Time seemed to stand still as Carolyn froze in the doorway, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of the triplets. The shopping bag she was holding slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. "I am sorry," she stammered, backing away. "I didn't know. I'll come back another time." Karen's voice was surprisingly steady as she rose from her chair. "I think you should join us." The tension in the room was palpable as Carolyn hesitated, clearly caught between the urge to flee and some other emotion that kept her rooted to the spot. Finally, she took a tentative step forward. "Hello, girls," she said, her voice barely audible. "You've grown up so beautiful." The sisters' reactions were as distinct as their personalities. Amara's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with barely contained anger. Nancy remained outwardly calm, though her analytical gaze never left Carolyn's face. And Na, always the most forgiving, looked conflicted, a mixture of hurt and curiosity crossing her features. "Why don't you have a seat?" Karen gestured to the empty chair at the table. Her hospitality ingrained despite the extraordinary circumstances. "We were just discussing the past." Carolyn moved like a woman in a dream, lowering herself into the chair with visible trepidation. Up close, the years had not been kind to her. Deep lines etched her face, and her hands showed the roughness of someone who had worked hard for little reward. "I don't know what to say," Carolyn finally spoke, looking at the triplets, but avoiding Karen's gaze. "I never expected to see you again." "That was the point, wasn't it?" Amara's voice was cold. "To make sure we disappeared completely." Carolyn flinched. "It wasn't like that." Then what was it like?" Amara interrupted. "Please enlighten us. Explain how a mother leaves 3 5-year-old girls on a doorstep with nothing but a backpack and walks away." "Amara," Na said softly, placing a hand on her sister's arm. "Let her speak." Carolyn's eyes welled with tears. "I was a mess after Dennis died. I couldn't cope with 3 children, with the grief, with everything. I thought you would be better off without me." "At the clinic connected to your family?" Nancy asked, her tone measured but pointed. "That's quite a coincidence." Surprise flickered across Carolyn's face. "You know about that?" "We know a lot of things," Nancy continued. "We know that clinic was founded with help from your mother. We know you left us somewhere you believed we'd be safe. What we don't know is why you were so determined to keep us from Karen." Carolyn's gaze darted nervously to Karen and back to the triplets. "It's complicated." "We have time," Karen said, her voice carrying a hint of steel beneath the politeness. Carolyn took a deep shuddering breath. "After Dennis died, things were bad between Karen and me. We had different ideas about how to raise you girls, about what Dennis would have wanted." "That's putting it mildly," Karen interjected. "You shut me out completely. One day you were just gone. No forwarding address. No way for me to contact my only grandchildren." "I was scared," Carolyn admitted. "Scared of losing control, scared of not being enough for them. And yes, scared of you, Karen. You were so perfect, so put together even after losing your son. You made me feel like a failure every time you walked into our house." "I was trying to help," Karen protested. "Your help felt like judgment," Carolyn shot back, a flash of old resentment cutting through her nervousness. "And after what happened with Dennis?" She stopped abruptly, color draining from her face. "After what happened with Dennis?" Amara echoed, leaning forward. "What exactly happened with our father, Carolyn?" The room fell silent as Carolyn struggled visibly with herself, twisting her hands in her lap. "The official report said he fell asleep at the wheel." Na prompted gently. Carolyn shook her head slowly. "He wasn't asleep. He was upset. We'd had a terrible fight that night. She glanced at Karen about the girls, about his deploying again, about money, about everything. He stormed out, drove too fast on those winding roads. Are you saying it was your fault? Nancy asked. No, Carolyn's response was immediate and forceful. It was an accident, a horrible accident. But there's more to it, isn't there? Karen's voice was quiet but insistent. The investigation found inconsistencies. Witnesses who said the car might have been run off the road. Carolyn's expression changed. A flash of real fear crossing her features. Those reports were inconclusive. The police closed the case. After you changed your statement 3 times, Nancy pointed out. We have the police records, Carolyn. First you said Dennis left at 10 p.m., then you said midnight. Then you said you weren't sure when he left, but that you were asleep. I was distraught, Carolyn snapped, a hint of desperation entering her voice. My husband had just died. I had 3 young children to care for, and I was being questioned like a criminal. Of course, I got confused about details. Karen watched Carolyn carefully, years of suspicion crystallizing into certainty. It wasn't just about the time, was it? It was about the argument. About what you fought over. Carolyn's eyes darted to the door as if calculating her chances of escape. Don't, Amara said firmly. We deserve the truth. All of it. After what seemed like an eternity, Carolyn's shoulders slumped in defeat. Dennis found out I'd been having an affair with his commanding officer, Major Roy Phillips. It had been going on for months while Dennis was deployed. When he confronted me that night, I denied it, but he had proof. Emails, phone records. He was furious, devastated. He said he was going to file for divorce and seek full custody of the girls. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Roy was with me that night, Carolyn continued, her voice hollow. He heard everything, panicked about his career being destroyed. When Dennis left, Roy followed him in his car. Karen's hand flew to her mouth. Dear God, Roy came back an hour later, Carolyn whispered. Said there had been an accident, that I needed to get my story straight, that no one would believe me anyway. A financially struggling mother of 3 against a decorated officer. So, you lied to protect your lover, Nancy stated flatly. And yourself, Amara added, disgust evident in her tone. Carolyn raised her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I was terrified. Roy made it clear what would happen if I talked. I'd lose everything, including you girls. So, I kept quiet, changed my statement like he told me to. But afterwards, I couldn't bear it. The guilt, the shame. I started drinking, falling apart. And what about Roy? Karen asked, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. What happened to him? He was transferred to Europe a few months later. Last I heard, he retired with full honors about 10 years ago. Carolyn's laugh was bitter. He got away with it completely. Did he force Dennis off the road deliberately? Na asked, the question they were all thinking. Carolyn hesitated. He said it was just meant to scare him, to talk to him, but that Dennis swerved too sharply and lost control. I don't know if that's true. I'll never know. A heavy silence fell over the room as they absorbed the devastating truth. Karen felt a lifetime of suspicion and grief crystallize into a single clarifying moment of understanding. This was why Carolyn had fled with the girls, why she had abandoned them in a way that would make them difficult to find. She had been running from the truth as much as from Karen. But why leave us at the clinic? Na finally asked, her voice thick with emotion. Why not just take us with you? Carolyn wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. After a few years, Roy started coming around again. He was stationed back in the States. Said he still had feelings for me, but there was something different about him. He'd become obsessive, controlling. I was afraid of what he might do, especially around you girls. She took a shaky breath. The night before I left you, he showed up drunk at our apartment, ranting about how you reminded him of Dennis, how he couldn't stand seeing his face in yours. He frightened me. I realized then that you'd never be safe with me, not as long as Roy was in the picture. So, you abandoned us to protect us? Amara's voice dripped with skepticism. I left you at my mother's clinic because I knew they had protocols that they'd keep you safe. Keep your identities protected when you went into the system, Carolyn insisted. I couldn't risk Roy finding you through me. And you never once checked on us, Nancy challenged. In 27 years, Carolyn lowered her eyes. I called the social services department once about a year after I left you. They wouldn't tell me anything except that you'd been placed with a family. I told myself that was enough, that you were better off without the mess of my life. Karen, who had been silent as she processed Carolyn's confession, finally spoke. All these years, I blamed you for taking them from me. I never imagined. Her voice trailed off as the full weight of the tragedy settled over her. I came back to Mapleton 5 years ago after my second husband died, Carolyn said quietly. I kept hoping I might run into you girls somehow. That fate would give me a chance to explain. When I saw in the local paper that Karen was still running her jewelry store, I started coming by occasionally, never quite finding the courage to speak to her. Amara exchanged glances with her sisters, a lifetime of communication passing between them in a single look. What do you want from us now, Carolyn? Forgiveness? Understanding? Before Carolyn could answer, the shop door opened again, and a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered. His military bearing was unmistakable even in civilian clothes. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said smoothly, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Carolyn with cold recognition. I was driving by and saw you through the window, Carolyn. It's been a long time. Karen felt her blood run cold as she realized who had just walked into her shop. As the color drained from Carolyn's face, the triplets looked between the newcomer and their former stepmother with growing comprehension. Roy! Carolyn whispered, her voice filled with terror. What are you doing here? The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly at Roy Phillips's arrival. Carolyn seemed to physically shrink in her chair while Karen straightened her spine, years of suspicion hardening into cold certainty as she faced the man she now knew had something to do with her son's death. Roy Phillips, Karen said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within her. I don't believe you've been invited to this family meeting. Roy's smile didn't reach his eyes as he assessed the situation. Family meeting? How interesting. His gaze traveled over the triplets with unsettling intensity. These must be Dennis's daughters. The resemblance is remarkable. What do you want, Roy? Carolyn asked, her voice trembling. I was having lunch across the street when I spotted you through the window, he replied casually, though there was a threatening undercurrent to his words. Quite a coincidence finding you all together like this, almost as if the past has come full circle. Nancy, ever observant, noticed how his hand kept reaching into his jacket pocket, fidgeting with something inside. Her analytical mind quickly assessed the potential threat, and she shifted slightly to position herself between Roy and her sisters. There are no coincidences here, Amara stated firmly, rising to her feet to match Roy's imposing presence. We found our grandmother and our former stepmother by design, not chance. Roy's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Former stepmother. That's an interesting way to put it. Abandonment is the word I'd use. You don't get to judge anyone here, Na said with uncharacteristic sharpness, especially considering what we now know about the night our father died. The calculated ease of Roy's demeanor slipped for a moment. A flash of something dangerous crossing his features before he composed himself. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Dennis's death was a tragic accident. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what you made them believe, Karen interjected, her voice cold with fury. Carolyn just told us everything, Mr. Phillips, about your affair. About you following Dennis that night, about the threats you made afterward to keep her quiet. Roy's eyes darted to Carolyn, who refused to meet his gaze. That's quite an accusation, Mrs. Hewley. One I suggest you'd be wise not to repeat outside this room. Are you threatening my grandmother? Amara stepped forward unintimidated. Roy chuckled though the sound held no warmth. Not at all, just offering some friendly advice. Unsubstantiated rumors can be damaging and dangerous. Karen reached for the phone on the small side table. I think it's time you left my store, Mr. Phillips. Unless you'd prefer I call Chief Sanford. He was my son's best friend, you know. I'm sure he'd be very interested in reopening Dennis's case with this new information. A tense silence fell over the room as Roy assessed his options, his hand still in his pocket. Finally, he shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. No need for that. I simply wanted to say hello to an old friend. He turned to Carolyn. We should catch up properly sometime, Carolyn, for old time's sake. The implicit threat in his words made Carolyn visibly pale. As Roy turned to leave, he paused at the door. Beautiful jewelry, by the way, he said, nodding toward the display case containing the Triplets designs. I understand you're quite successful now. Your father would have been proud. His smile turned cruel, though I doubt he'd appreciate how you've reconnected with the woman who abandoned you. After Roy left, the tension in the room remained palpable. Carolyn was shaking and Karen quickly poured her a glass of water. He hasn't changed, Carolyn whispered. After all these years, he still has that same look in his eyes. Nancy, who had been watching Roy intently throughout the encounter, turned to the others. He was following you, wasn't he, Carolyn? That's why you've been coming to Karen's shop, not to build up courage to speak to her, but because you were looking for somewhere safe. Carolyn nodded slowly. He showed up at the supermarket where I work about a month ago. Said he'd moved back to Mapleton for his retirement, that it was such a pleasant coincidence finding me here. But there was nothing coincidental about it. He's been watching me, following me, showing up places he shouldn't know I'd be. Why didn't you go to the police? Na asked. And tell them what? That a decorated retired officer is shopping at the same stores I do? Carolyn laughed bitterly. Roy's always been careful. Never anything I could prove, just enough to let me know he's there, that he hasn't forgotten. And now he knows about us, Amara said grimly. Karen's expression was resolute as she looked at each of them in turn. He's not going to harm any of you. Not again. Not ever. What can we do? Na asked. It's been 27 years. We have no proof of what happened the night Dad died. Nancy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Actually, we might. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through files. When we were investigating Dennis's death, I requested everything I could from the original case. Most of it was, as Carolyn described, inconclusive evidence, changed statements. But there was one witness statement that never made it into the final report. She found what she was looking for and turned her phone so the others could see. A teenager named Michael Dawson was coming home late that night and reported seeing two cars on Ridge Road. One he identified as fitting the description of Dennis's car and another following close behind. He said it looked like the second car was trying to run the first one off the road. When he was interviewed later, he changed his story, saying he wasn't sure what he saw. Roy got to him, Karen realized. Probably, Nancy agreed. But here's the interesting part. Michael Dawson is now Detective Michael Dawson with the Mapleton Police Department. Amara's eyes widened. You think he'd be willing to come forward now? It's worth asking, Nancy replied. And there's more. The original forensic report noted paint transfer on Dennis's car that didn't match his vehicle's color. That evidence was deemed inconclusive in the final report, but the photos are still in the file. The color of Roy's car, Carolyn said quietly. It was dark blue. Dennis's was red. Karen took a deep breath. Years of grief and suspicion finally coalescing into a path forward. I'm calling Chief Sanford right now. It's time the truth came out. As Karen made the call, Amara turned to Carolyn, her expression conflicted. Why did you come to the jewelry store today? What were you looking for? Carolyn reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I was bringing this. She opened it to reveal a delicate gold chain with 3 small diamond pendants. It was the last gift Dennis gave me before he deployed. He said the 3 diamonds represented his daughters, each perfect and unique, yet stronger together. I thought you should have it. Na reached out tentatively to touch the necklace, tears welling in her eyes. It's beautiful. I kept it all these years, even when I sold everything else to survive, Carolyn admitted. It was the one thing I couldn't part with, the one connection I had left to the family we were supposed to be. Nancy studied Carolyn's face, her analytical mind assessing the sincerity of the woman who had abandoned them. You said Roy has been following you for a month. Is that why you decided to bring this now? Because you were afraid something might happen to you? Carolyn looked away. Partly, but also because I saw the article about your jewelry line being featured at Karen's store. I knew it wasn't a coincidence that you'd found her somehow. I thought maybe it was time I faced the past, too. Karen returned from making her call, her expression determined. Chief Sanford is coming by in an hour with Detective Dawson. He wants to hear everything we know about Dennis's accident. What about Roy? Amara asked. He knows we're on to him now. What if he tries something? Sanford is sending a patrol car to watch the store until he arrives, Karen assured her. And another to find Roy and keep an eye on him. Carolyn looked down at her hands. I should have done this years ago. I was just so scared. Fear keeps us trapped in the past, Na said gently. But the truth sets us free to move forward. Speaking of moving forward, Karen said, turning to the triplets with a slight change of subject. We never did finish our discussion about your jewelry collection. Before all of this happened, I was about to tell you that I'd like to feature your pieces prominently in my store. In fact, she hesitated, then continued more firmly. I've been considering retirement. The arthritis in my hands makes detailed work difficult these days. I've been looking for someone to take over the business. Someone with vision and talent. Amara looked surprised. Are you offering us your business? I'm offering you your inheritance, Karen corrected. This store was built with your father's help. It was always meant to be part of his legacy and yours. I think it's time it came full circle, don't you? Before any of the triplets could respond, Karen's store assistant burst into the back room, her face pale. Mrs. Hewley, there's a man outside arguing with the police officer who just arrived. He's trying to get in, saying he needs to speak with you urgently. They all rushed to the front of the store to see Roy engaged in a heated exchange with a uniformed officer on the sidewalk. When Roy spotted them through the window, his expression darkened. His hand went to his pocket again, and this time he began to withdraw something that caught the sunlight with a metallic gleam. The officer reacted instantly, drawing his weapon and shouting commands that were muffled through the glass. Pedestrians scattered, some dropping to the ground, others running for cover. In that moment of chaos, no one noticed the black SUV that screeched to a halt at the curb, or the tall figure that emerged from it with purposeful strides, moving directly toward Roy Phillips with a look of grim determination. That's Chief Sanford, Karen gasped. He's early. As they watched in horror, Roy spun around, the object in his hand now clearly visible. Just as the chief approached, time seemed to slow down. The next few seconds stretching into an eternity as the confrontation on the sidewalk spiraled toward an outcome none of them could predict or prevent. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Chief Sanford moved toward Roy with the confidence of a man who had spent decades in law enforcement. Phillips, drop what you're holding and put your hands where I can see them. Roy's face contorted with rage as he realized he was cornered. The metallic object in his hand caught the sunlight again. Not a gun, as they had feared, but a small pocket knife with an ornate handle. This isn't what it looks like, Sanford, Roy called out, his voice carrying through the glass to those watching from inside the store. I'm just an old friend checking in on Carolyn. Put the knife down, Roy, the chief ordered, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. Let's talk about this like reasonable people. Inside the store, Carolyn clutched Karen's arm. He's not going to surrender. You don't know him like I do. Everyone get back from the windows, Nancy instructed, her practical nature taking over. If something happens, we don't want to be in the line of fire. As they moved deeper into the store, away from the potential danger, Amara noticed Carolyn's paler and trembling hands. "Are you okay?" Carolyn shook her head, her breathing becoming labored. "I need my medication. It's in my purse, but I dropped it when I saw you all." Na quickly located Carolyn's purse near the entrance and brought it to her. Inside was a prescription bottle for heart medication. "How many do you need?" "2 pills." Carolyn gasped, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. "Water, please." Karen hurried to get a glass of water while Na helped Carolyn take her medication. The stress of confronting the past in Roy was clearly taking a physical toll on her. "I'm sorry," Carolyn whispered as she took the pills. "For everything, for not being stronger when it mattered most." Outside, the standoff continued. Chief Sanford had been joined by Detective Dawson, who had arrived shortly after him. The younger officer circled to approach Roy from another angle, effectively cutting off his escape routes. "You know why we're here, Phillips," Sanford said, his voice carrying authority. "It's time to talk about what really happened to Dennis Brown." Roy's expression darkened. "That case was closed decades ago. Tragic accident. End of story." "Not anymore," Dawson called out. "We're reopening the investigation based on new evidence." For a moment, Roy seemed to waver, uncertainty crossing his features. Then, with surprising speed for a man his age, he lunged toward Sanford, the knife glinting in his hand. The 2 uniformed officers reacted instantly, tackling Roy to the ground. The knife skittered across the sidewalk as they subdued him, securing his wrists with handcuffs despite his violent struggles. "This is assault on a police officer," Phillips, Sanford said grimly as the officers brought Roy to his feet. "But that's the least of your worries now." Inside the store, they watched as Roy was led to a patrol car, his face a mask of fury and defeat. Chief Sanford spoke briefly to Detective Dawson, then headed toward the store entrance. The bell